What's up, everyone, and welcome back to our study on apologetics. Well, today we're going to continue our series where we're looking at different worldviews and religions, and we're taking a look at how they fall short of God's truth that's found in our Bible. Our focus in this lesson is going to be on Buddhism, and this study is going to give us a clear vision of what the Bible teaches as compared to the teachings of Buddha. Well, Buddhism is a worldview, is a religion that's a relative of the religion of Hinduism. It was birthed in India around the 6th century BC, and from there it spread throughout Asia. And currently Buddhism is mainly located in places like Japan, China, nations in that part of the world, but it is gaining great popularity within Western countries, especially within the United States. Buddhism got its start through a man named Gautama Siddhartha, and he started teaching Buddhist philosophy. This man was born in 562 BC, and he was actually the heir to the throne in India. And the people of his kingdom hoped that he would become their most successful king in India's history. Because of this, Gautama led a very sheltered life, and he wasn't exposed to all of the suffering or problems that other people in his kingdom faced. And it was on his journeys to the throne, when he was going towards the throne, that he saw what he called the four distressing sights. And these actually became the foundation for Buddhist teaching. Well, these first three sights, the first three things that he experienced were a sick man, an old man, and a dead man. And Gautama was deeply troubled by these newly discovered troubles of sickness, old age, and death, things he had never seen before. Then the fourth sight came, and this was a beggar who had denied himself of all things to seek enlightenment. And at age 29, Gautama abandoned his wife, abandoned his son, so that he could devote his life to helping those who were suffering, and so he himself could seek this so-called enlightenment that they were looking for. Well, as Gautama wandered searching for enlightenment, he centered his wanderings, his travels, around the question of why is man unhappy. See, Gautama tried everything, almost everything, to get to the answer of why he wasn't happy. Why are we so unhappy? He did things like starved himself, then he would indulge himself, torture himself, and finally, after years and years of this quest, he sat in what they call full lotus position under the sacred Indian Bodhi tree, and it was there that he decided to remain until he was fully enlightened, as he called it. Then after some time of sitting there under that tree, he finally stood up. And it was at that moment of standing up that he declared that he was Buddha. And he also declared that the mystery of life, this great mystery, well, all the answers had been revealed to him. Well, what does this mean that he declared himself Buddha? Well, like the word Christ, which means Messiah, the term Buddha is just a title. It's not an actual name. It means the enlightened one, or the one who woke up. And Buddhism claims that we are spiritually unaware until we become enlightened, or until we wake up. And Buddhism takes on the characteristics of the experiences of its founder. And what I mean by that is Buddhism isn't really a religion as much as a life philosophy, which claims to open you up to experiences that you wouldn't otherwise see in life. Now, there are two types of Buddhists: the Theravada, which is the conservative side, or the Mahayana, which is the liberal side. And Buddhists follow three groups of writings, which are named the three baskets, or the Tripitaka. These writings are over 10 times the size of the Bible and contains what Buddhists believe to be the sermons, teachings, and life philosophy of Gautama, or Buddha. And this Tripitaka, this writing, was written centuries after he died. There are no manuscripts detailing the life of Gautama, no recorded eyewitness accounts, no transcripts of his teachings. So Buddhists rely on the traditions passed down from generation to generation. There's no true writings of this man at all. And that's just some of the history behind it. So how does Buddhism compare and contrast to Christianity? What are the core differences? Well, as we've done each week, we're going to examine some questions in order to gain a clear understanding of these differences between the teachings of Buddhism and the truths of Christianity. One, what does Buddhism teach about God? Well, the Bible points to creation, miracles, the fulfilled prophecies, Jesus' resurrection. The Bible points to all these as evidence for the existence of God. Even more, the Bible teaches us that we find the point and purpose of our life through serving God and having a relationship with Him. Buddhism, on the other hand, is completely silent on the existence of God. See, Buddhism claims to take no stance on God. They don't claim He does or doesn't exist, like some of the other worldviews we've looked at. See, the Bible is very clear and says that creation itself demonstrates God's existence. A religion without God? Well, to me, that's as meaningless as iced tea without ice or fried chicken without the chicken. So the Bible's teachings contradict Buddhist teaching on the existence of God. See, the Bible reveals that God exists and that the purpose of faith, the purpose of religion, is to please God. Question 2, what does Buddhism teach about the human condition? Well, the human tendencies of greed, anger, deception, ignorance, and longings, sin, These aren't new to humanity now in the 21st century. They've always been here. Buddha called people that lived in this sin, well, he called them unenlightened, fools, and blind for living that way. And modern Buddhism follows the same perspective on humanity. To this very day, Buddhism teaches that only the enlightened ones can walk the, quote, eightfold path until all earthly desires are eliminated. And this eightfold path are 8 steps. They're kind of what they determine as right views, right intentions, right speech, right conduct, right mode of livelihood, right effort, right awareness, and right concentration, or the right meditation. And perfecting these steps require great self-control over many different lives, according to the Buddhists. And to give you some more numbers, a person must pass through 4 stages, overcoming 10 hindrances. And the later stages require someone to become a monk, which means abandoning all family life and everything that you love. And Buddhism teaches that Gautama, well, it says that he took at least 550 lives to achieve perfection or to reach enlightenment. According to Buddhism, the consequences of your acts in this life will impact your next life through the process, as we've learned, called reincarnation. Buddhism teaches that we must gain knowledge and then meditate to gain release from this cycle of rebirth. And the ultimate goal of Buddhism is to achieve or enter into nirvana. And nirvana is kind of like, for them, heaven. Buddhism teaching includes 3 core principles. The first is rebirth or reincarnation. Again, we looked at this before. And Buddhism teaches that when a person dies, he or she returns to life as another person, an animal, or even a god. Buddhists believe that the spirit or our soul doesn't move on to another life, but your consequences of your past actions, your karma, that's what continues from one life to another. Now, if you remember, the principle of karma teaches that everything that happens to a person in this life, good or bad, is the result of their conduct in previous lives. And Buddhism teaches that your actions in your life right now will impact what happens to you in a future life. Buddhists don't believe in coincidence. They believe there is no divine intervention. Nothing results from chance. They believe that all we experience is basically a reward or a punishment for what we've done in our past lives. And the third principle is nirvana. Buddhism teaches that a person's ultimate goal, again, is to be released from the cycle of rebirth, from being born over and over and over again, or the suffering, and going to nirvana. Nirvana is what they call the state of rest. This is when people have finally released themselves, emptied themselves of all earthly desires. And guys, Christianity does teach of Jesus' resurrection. And it teaches of his ultimate return to redeem his people, and the fact that when someone dies, their spirit will be resurrected on the day of Christ's return. But this is different from the Buddhist teaching of reincarnation. See, resurrection brings someone back to life that was once dead, and that same spirit reunites with the body. And as you take a look at the teachings of Buddhism, you come to realize that there is no hope of heaven for someone who follows this philosophy. Heaven doesn't exist in Buddhism. But, like Buddhism, Christianity does address the issue of being judged for our actions. But in Christianity, there is a judge. It's not something called karma. It's Jesus Christ. See, in Buddhism, it's our actions that determine how we're judged. But with no judge, this belief is extremely vague and lacking in its merit and its truth. Buddhism teaches that our desires are too strong and we must be released of them, whereas Christianity teaches that our desires are too weak and we must lean upon God's strength to overcome them, not ours. Christianity teaches and tells us that there is a healthy and God-honoring way to fulfill the desires in our life. Buddhism, on the other hand, cures the human condition through losing yourself, while Jesus tells us life is found when we submit ourselves unto him. Well, getting back to our questions, number 3, how does Buddhism address suffering? Buddhist teaching about suffering is based on the 4 truths. Truth number 1, suffering is an essential part of life. Troubles are basic and inherent to life. Number 2, the cause of suffering is human desire. 3, the solution to suffering is to eliminate earthly desires, especially the desire to exist as an individual. And 4, the steps to defeat these desires are the eightfold path that we talked about earlier. Essentially, Buddhism is teaching that humans deserve to suffer. And no matter the level of suffering we experience, it all stems from our craving for personal enjoyment and possessions. It stems from our desires. Well, Buddhists believe that life as we know it, well, it's all an illusion. Everything around us is an illusion. And that the ignorant ones, we're the ones that don't realize the deception around us. And they believe that a person will continue to be reborn over and over again into more and more lives until they're again fully enlightened. And because they believe life goes on and on and on, this includes suffering. And life continues, so suffering continues. And the amount of suffering we experience in life, according to the Buddhists, is a result of actions from a past life and the fact that we're uninformed about the reality around us, as I've stated already. And they teach that the way to finally have this suffering to cease in our lives is through gaining that knowledge, or, you guessed it, becoming enlightened to what's truly around us. Question number 4, what does Buddhism teach about salvation? Well, there is no need for salvation in Buddhist teaching because there is no God, remember? There's no God to be offended by someone's actions. In Buddhism, the ultimate goal of spiritual beings, the ultimate goal of humans, is not salvation, but it's eliminating desires so that nirvana can be attained. Each step on this eightfold path, well, it has to be perfected for someone to be enlightened enough or free of all personal desires. And this whole process of perfection relies completely and entirely on the effort and achievement of a person. It's up to us to free ourselves from all of our desires. So this means it depends completely on our works. But again, Christianity teaches what? It teaches that we cannot earn salvation. It is received through God's mercy and God's grace. Buddhism's ultimate test of validity is found in experience. Its doctrines, its teachings state that no one can tell another person when they're enlightened, and no one can release you of your suffering. And this basically happens through hearing a teaching that resonates or echoes within you. And then through experiences, you find out whether or not it connects with your psychological makeup. And then you adopt that teaching as your own spiritual path to enlightenment. Ultimately, everyone is his or her own judge of reality and enlightenment. I determine if I'm enlightened or not. Not a God, but me. And this leaves me with a lot of questions. How do I know if I'm enlightened? What's my enlightenment compared to your enlightenment? There's a lot of questions here. Guys, Christianity offers undisputable evidence of God's existence. Evidence of His Word. Evidence of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And all of this is confirmed through fulfilled prophecy that we looked at the very beginning of this teaching. His miracles. And most of all, the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Guys, Christianity teaches us that the only true sacrifice to forgive sins is by the death of the Son of God. The only way to receive salvation is through Jesus. To receive this, we must trust Him and obey Him in this life. It's not about Buddha. It's not about Muhammad. It's not about all these other things. It's not about all these follow this rule, follow that rule. It's about trusting Jesus with your life and trusting in the life that He gave for you. And if you're watching this and you don't know Jesus as your Lord and Savior, let your group leader know tonight. Speak with somebody within your group. Don't go out of this room without knowing this for sure. Jesus gave up His life, guys, so that you could have life. Gain that life tonight. As always, guys, thanks for joining us. Next time, we're going to be looking at the religion of Mormonism. So we'll see you then.